Well, I am an American. I'm an average, everyday person. I'm someone that's lived in Mississippi, started businesses in Mississippi, raised my kids in Mississippi, and I understand how hard it is to survive in Mississippi when everybody has their hand in your pocket, the federal government, the state government, local governments. I understand how we balance budgets. I do it in my home. I've done it for every city, and I do it for businesses. We need that in Washington. We need fiscal accountability and fiscal responsibility in DC. So I'm just someone from our community, from our neighborhoods, that understands what we need. Accountability one. I don't just say I'm fiscally conservative, I actually am. I have a record that runs on it. We've balanced the budget in Biloxi. I've balanced my business's budgets. I actually do that. I've reduced budget. We generated a surplus in Biloxi last year. They've incorporated what's called the Deming rule. And so in doing so, we generated another $250,000 in savings by outsourcing jobs that can be done better by the private sector than can be done by the public sector. What I do is keep my hand on the pulse of our finances. What the incumbent does is goes to Washington, gets along and goes along, and doesn't keep his hand on the steering wheel. He's the only Republican from Mississippi that's voted for these continued funding resolutions that expand our budget, increase our deficit, and violate the oath that he's taken and the president's promise to the United States of America. The president proposed a budget this year of $3.3 trillion, which has about a 7% reduction in spending. After all is said and done, all the continued funding resolutions, we spent $4.4 trillion, $1.1 trillion, and added another $800 billion to our national deficit. This is ridiculous, and it's unacceptable. And this is why I ran in December when he was the only Republican in our congressional delegation to vote for that. I decided that it was time for someone to go to Washington and actually be fiscally responsible. My team has been in the Pine Belt. We spent a lot of money polling before we took this leap to see really where his favorability numbers are, and they're far below where any Republican incumbent should be at this time, especially during the president's time in office. Traveling through the Pine Belt, we've noticed and realized that the Pine Belt really isn't pro-Palazzo. They're anti-democrat. They're anti-irresponsibility. They love the message of fiscal responsibility. When I meet a lot of people, and I've been going from club to club, group to group, community to community, and households to households, and a lot of people love our message of fiscal responsibility. They love the idea of sending someone to Washington that will actually get there, and not just say he's conservative when he's here, but actually be conservative when they get there. And I've found that the Pine Belt is strong for Palazzo because he's never run against a real conservative Republican. He's really run against a Democrat, and then a Democrat that converted to the Republican Party. The Pine Belt is not tolerant of liberal Democrats in Washington. I am 100% in support of defense spending to those contractors here in Mississippi, like Ingalls and Northrop Grumman and all those groups. The Constitution provides 1/3 of our enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8 for defense. So that's all legitimate spending. I'm upset that we've had some cuts in shipbuilding here for Ingalls, and I would fight for those increases. I think that any good Republican, any good responsible Republican should be doing that in Washington. So some of the more important economy drivers on the coast are our bases. And if we don't keep an eye and make sure that those bases retain funding, retain functionality, we're going to lose a lot here on the coast. 26% of all of our retirees in the military are on the coast. We were close to losing Keesler's base. The city of Biloxi had to get in the fight and bring that to the attention of our congressional delegation. Stephen Palazzo should have his hand on the pulse of what's going on here on the coast. Mayors like Fofo Gillich and others shouldn't have to unite to get our congressmen to understand how important that base and that hospital is to our economy here. Trump's agenda falls right in line with a lot of things that I've been talking about for a long time. Obviously, tax reform. He's done a good job providing some reformation in our tax code. I think that we need to look at how we're spending our money. He's talked about reducing spending. He said if we could balance the budget if we had the right people in office, and we don't. You see, our congressman is the only person that's continued to vote for the expansion of our national deficits, increasing our budgets, these continued funding resolutions that fund all these liberal programs that we don't believe in as South Mississippians. The president said no funding for abortion services. So there wasn't any direct funding in the last continued funding resolution, but there were some tax extenders that were slid in at the last moment that do give tax breaks and credits for abortion services. So Congress didn't, but they sneakily did wiggle that in, and Stephen's the only Republican. Palazzo's the only Republican from Mississippi that voted for it. You know, that domestic spending package that was sent to the president was so bad our liberal Democrat didn't vote for it. The one Democrat we have in Washington said no. Well, actually, he didn't say yes, but Palazzo did. Palazzo said yes. Now, we all agree that the domestic spending package should have been supported. And while the Congress has continued to inflate the budget, they haven't added money to defense spending. They haven't added money to border security. They've only added money to everything the president said he doesn't need money for, that they want. It's simple. Leadership. The things that we believe in, the things that we need in South Mississippi, we have to fight for. We need a voice in Washington that will be a leader on balancing the budget, that will be a leader on fiscal responsibility, that will be a leader on protecting the unborn, that will be a leader on the Second Amendment. We need a voice that governs as a leader for what we believe in South Mississippi. Balancing the budget is the most important aspect of our future. It's the greatest threat to our posterity.